So now we're going to discuss the scalene and prevertebral muscles, which will be question number 54 from section A. First, I would like you guys to know that I am on page 29 of the Netter's Atlas. Now, as you look at this diagram, this is going to represent the prevertebral muscles and the scalene muscles. According to our syllabus, there are 5 prevertebral muscles, okay? The first prevertebral muscle is going to be your longus colli. The longus colli is going to originate from the transverse processes of C5 to T3, or it should be T3 to C5 because it's an ascending muscle. And this muscle is going to continue cranially, and this muscle will insert onto the anterior arch of the atlas, as you can see right here. Okay. Now, the second muscle of the prevertebral group will be the longus capitis. So the first one is the longus colli, and the second one will be the longus capitis. Now, the longus capitis is going to originate from the transverse processes of C6 to C3, and is going to insert onto the basilar part of the occipital bone. You see this part? The basilar part of the occipital bone. And the basilar part of the occipital bone will be a continuation from the foramen magnum to the occipitosphenosyncondrosis. Okay? Now, the third and fourth muscles of the prevertebral group are going to be originating on the transverse process of the atlas. These two muscles are called the rectus capitis anterior and the rectus capitis lateralis. Okay? Now they're both going to originate on the transverse process of the atlas, and they both are actually going to insert onto the basilar part of the occipital bone. Now the difference is the rectus capitis lateralis will originate on the transverse process of the atlas and will insert onto the occipital part of the basilar, the basilar part of the occipital bone, but will insert laterally to the occipital condyle. Okay? Now, the fifth muscle is not on here, but the fifth muscle in the prevertebral group is going to be the intertransversal anterior cervical muscles, which will basically be muscles that will run between the anterior tubercles of the transverse processes of the cervical vertebra. Okay? Now that is going to include your prevertebral muscles. Now another name for prevertebral muscles are going to be your deep cervical muscles. And also the entire innervation for the muscles I have just discussed will be the cervical plexus. Now we will quickly discuss the scalene muscles. Okay, you have your anterior and your middle and your posterior. Okay, now I find this muscle to be quite easy to explain actually. Let me just get a better view. Okay, so your anterior scalene muscle is going to originate from the transverse processes of C3 to C6 and is going to insert onto the scalene tubercle on the first rib anterior to the sulcus for the subclavian artery. Your middle scalene muscle is going to originate from the transverse processes of C1 to C7 and will insert on the first rib dorsal to the sulcus for the subclavian artery. So you see this artery, this red one right here, that's going to be subclavian artery. You can clearly see that the anterior scalene is going to insert onto the scalene tubercle, which will be anterior to the sulcus of the subclavian artery, because obviously the subclavian artery is going to lie on the sulcus, so underneath it will be the sulcus, and then you see posteriorly inserting onto there is going to be the middle scalene. Okay? Now the posterior scalene muscle is going to originate from the transverse processes of C4 to C6 and will insert onto the second rib. Okay? And that's as simple as that. That's going to cover your prevertebral muscles and your scalene muscles.